Hi everybody, Rachel here. Today I'm going to be talking about the deck I played at the SCG Con in Atlanta this past weekend, which was the Diggy Diggy Hole deck. Now I'll admit I didn't know it was called Diggy Diggy Hole when I originally picked it, and that would have made it so much better because I absolutely love that name. Diggy Diggy Hole is an amazing name for a deck. So for those of you who don't know, this is the Seven Dwarfs Mine Amber Steel list. It is a bit of a tempo list and a bit of a aggressive tempo list at that. It's got a decent amount of answers to things. It has a lot of good kind of cheap costed aggressive lore questing characters. And it does have stuff to be able to do late game, thus making it a tempo deck. So let's kind of start at the end, which is how do you win, and then we'll work backwards to what do we want our first couple turns to look like. So let's start with how we win. Where did my pictures go? There they are. So the way that you win with the Diggy Diggy Hole deck is by getting a bunch of low-costed characters that quest for a boatload of lore, turning them sideways, and winning the game that way. So the obvious ones that come to mind here are Piglet, which if you got more than one character out, he quests for 3. Daisy Duck. Downside to Daisy, she could feed your opponent's cards, so Daisy's good in a lot of matchups. There's some she is not good at though. Lawrence is great for turn 3 play. Is a 4/4 toughness, can't be brawled. So power and toughness. No, strength and willpower. That one can't be brawled, and he's a good fighter too if you need to kind of take out stuff. And then Lilo's awesome. You can replay Lilo from the discard pile. Lilo's better late game than she is early game. You might look at Lilo and say all-star, gonna play her as soon as I can, but one of the others is better as your turn 2 play, and Lilo is a nice finishing piece there. So we win by questing for a bunch of lore, playing out a bunch of characters that cost very little, especially kind of late game, and winning that way. So how do we get there? Well, if you were to just play out a whole bunch of low-costed lore questers, your opponent would most assuredly get rid of them. So the way that you're going to get there is by controlling their side of the board first of all, to ensure that you can kind of make those extra kind of legs of the race there to 20. So first one that comes to mind is removal. If you remove their things can't remove your things, or not as effectively. So first pieces of removal are Little Cinderella and the songs in the deck. So there's 2 songs in the deck, Strength of Raging Fire and Let the Storm Rage On. Little Cinderella can sing both of them, and if you're playing something like, say, Bounce, she gets rid of the bounce targets. She can get rid of Flynn, who can gain them a lot of lore. If you're playing against aggro, she can help clear the field for your questers so that they have nothing else out there to quest against. Little Cinderella is just like a solid play, and obviously her bit of removal is what really helps kind of control your opponent's side of the board to enable your winning strategy. Next piece of removal that we have here is the 7 Dwarf Mines and the 7 Dwarfs, or 2 of the 7 Dwarfs in this case. So we have Happy and Doc that we play in this deck. Happy is good if you're playing against somebody who's got evasive characters, like let's say Diablo and discard. And then the 7 Dwarf Mine is a solid card too. So the first time every turn, when you move a character to the mine, you can deal 1 damage to chosen character, or you can do 2 damage to a chosen character if you moved a dwarf there. So we have our 2 dwarfs here. You move one of them to the mine, you ping something for 2. If you move a non-dwarf, you ping it for 1. Cool thing is if you got 2 mines out, you move your character to 1 mine, then you move your character to the other mine. That is between 1 and 4 damage, depending on if they're dwarves or not, that you can kind of hit their characters for. You can kind of see how this would definitely add up and be able to help also control your opponent's board. And the mine gains you a passive lore each turn, which is awesome. Last thing I'll say about these cards while they're up is Doc is great, especially if you play him with an open hand. Not open hand, empty hand, because he draws you 2 cards when he comes in. So empty hand, this is, so Doc's a solid piece of card draw as well for this deck. So last kind of piece of removal I think that I'm going to talk about is Calhoun. Calhoun is an awesome card. She's great against most decks out there. Resist 1 means that even though with her 2 toughness, she can survive a good amount of threats that are out there. 3 damage that she does to things does take most things out. And whenever she banishes a character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore. So if you need to do that one extra little piece of damage, I mean, the dwarf mine can help with that, or some songs, but Calhoun can take out the vast majority of things on her own. Or at the very least, she should make your opponent think twice before turning their thing sideways, because it might just be a free 2 lore that they're giving you by being able to utilize Calhoun that way. You need to make sure, obviously, that your stuff stays safe. So it's not just removal that you need against your opponent. You do need a couple of other little tricky pieces. There's a couple in here like Pluto and Kita. I won't necessarily talk about them a huge amount because Pete is the one that kind of is good across the board, or at least for the majority of the decks that are out there right now, or at least the decks that I don't like to play against. Pete says that your opponents can't play actions during the next turn. So this obviously stops. Be prepared. Stops like half the cards, and it's not half the cards, but it feels like half the cards in Steel Song. It stops brawls and stuff like that. The new Maui that like gains lore every time you play actions and recurs actions, that totally pauses him for a turn too. So ideally you want to play, if you're playing against a red deck, you want to play Pete right before they hit 7 ink, because that stops them from being able to be prepared. If you're playing against Steel Song, I mean, any turn they're going to be singing songs. So anytime where you're looking at your side of the board and thinking, I really don't want them to remove my stuff right now, you'd want to play Pete before that. All right. So I think that's kind of the gist for like the pieces there to how to get you to win the game, how to make your stuff safe enough to be able to get to the end game. Now let's talk about how our first couple turns are going to look in order to be able to get there as best as possible. So first turn, stellar, ideal first turn play in most matches. She might not be against like the blue-red Sisu popsicle lists, but she's still not bad against that, is Little Cinderella. So Little Cinderella, ideal first turn play in my opinion, because most decks will play a turn 1 character, and when you pair Little Cinderella with the 2 songs on turn 2, you get to kind of control your opponent's first turn and like stop their stuff. I will say that obviously Little Cinderella is a little bit better on the play than the draw, because it is possible, especially if you're playing against another deck with Little Cinderellas, that they're just going to do the same thing back to you and remove your Little Cindy. However, again, in the dark, Little Cinderella is the ideal turn 1 play. Turn 2, what do you want to do? Well, there's a couple different options in turn 2. There's Shmi, Piglet, Calhoun. In my opinion, Piglet, though awesome, you want to make sure he's going to stay out and stay safe. And there's a lot of things that can remove a Piglet. So my ideal turn 2 plays are either Mr. Shmi, if you have him in your hand, or Calhoun, depending on what your opponent has played. Calhoun, like I said, stops your opponent from turning things sideways as easily, and it does kind of clean up some things nicely on the board. Shmi can too. Shmi is a 3/3, so Shmi doesn't get brawled. I guess neither does Calhoun. And Shmi can kind of, I mean, he takes damage no matter what, unless you got Piglet out. But they both are very solid kind of turn 2 plays that will threaten your opponent's turn 1 and turn 2 plays. Turn 3, I would say ideally, is going to be a Lawrence. Quest for 2, it's a 4. He's a 4/4 when he comes out, which is nothing to complain about in the slightest. And when you pair Lawrence with Rapunzel coming out on the next turn, just say, so say you play Lawrence next turn, you swing in and take something out with Lawrence, try to make sure that he lives. You can heal Lawrence up pretty near completely with Rapunzel there and draw some cards off of it. So Rapunzel's the other piece of card draw in the deck. And that is kind of the gist on the Diggy Diggy Hole deck. So I love the Diggy Diggy Hole deck. It was a lot of fun, very fast, and the ideal thing, in my opinion, about this deck is it is both consistent, it is strong, and you should win fast. And if you win fast, then you have plenty of time to eat your snacks, have a drink, and kind of sit back and relax before your next match. And that can be a huge bonus against your opponents who are all sitting there thinking pretty hard for the next 15 to 20 minutes. So Diggy Diggy Hole is awesome. If you are interested in more information, I got a several page write-up on the deck blog. Hope you learned something, hope I was helpful, and hope you're enjoying Diggy Diggy Hole as much as I am. Thanks very much.